There are going to be disagreements about what the negotiations on land and land swaps are, but there has to be a security guarantee for Ukraine. You know, Ukraine had a security guarantee from Russia and the United States and many others if they gave up their nuclear weapons. And now here we are. Russia promised to protect Ukraine, and yet they are the attacker. So I think the security guarantee is key. And I think a security guarantee that is European boots on the ground working in concert with America, giving other kinds of support, air support, intel support, could be a very important time where clearly there would be a ceasefire and it would start setting a parameter that would be defended, and Russia would know that they really can't go farther. Because if you would let me have a minute, there was an almost alarming report that Lavrov from Russia did a radio interview saying that they were going to continue this fight. They were not going to have a long-term peace, that Ukraine is Russia's, and was very clear, even saying that they were going to do more to absorb Belarus, and even doing attacks within the Baltics, which are NATO allies. So I think this is a very serious part of the negotiation, and it is essential.
Ambassador, the plan that Tyler was referencing earlier, of course, being discussed by European leaders, sounds an awful lot like Article 5. It just seems to stop short of full NATO membership for Ukraine. How do security guarantees that Ukraine would find acceptable also be palatable to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has looked on NATO as what he calls a trigger for this war?
You know, I think it's time for us not to do everything that Putin is demanding. And I think it is time to say there is a red line here and you can't cross it. And there are a couple of points that are very important for Ukraine, but the main one is this security that there wouldn't be another incursion. And I think it's time that Russia know that the line is drawn and there are consequences that need to be perpetrated. And Putin needs to know that those are serious, that they're not just things that we're going to say and walk away. And the Europeans have to be a part of this. It is important, and I give President Trump credit for bringing the Europeans in, because they have to provide the bulk of this kind of security, and it's in their interest to do so. And they do have leverage with the funds that are Russian funds that have been impounded because of Russia's activities. And we need to have some payment of consequence to Russia if they keep the current bombing that they are doing on Ukraine, showing that they care nothing about any kind of peace or agreement of any kind.
Well, Ambassador, how much of a role, to follow up, should the U.S. play in these security guarantees? Should it actually involve some troop commitment from the United States? The president has made clear that he is not interested in that, but would such a commitment make the guarantees a little more credible?
Well, I think a lot of people are saying troops on the ground. I don't think troops on the ground are necessary, but I do think American support is necessary. And that is what we can provide that Europe cannot. And that would certainly be air cover. This is much like, not exactly, but much like what we did in Afghanistan. We did have troops on the ground there for advisory purposes only, but we were giving the air cover to the rest of the allies that were on the ground in the provinces in Afghanistan. And when we left Afghanistan, all of the allies had to do that as well, because we had the intel and the air cover that had been provided for everyone. I think it would be somewhat like that that could work with Ukraine, that we would provide the air cover, which would be so important. And right now, you see what's happening with Ukraine being just a sitting duck and not able to take out all of the missiles that are being fired by Russia. And I think if we had air cover and intel protection, and Putin would know that, then we would really begin to see a ceasefire.
Well, to build on this, I'd love to get your thoughts on what really has been this White House's push to get our allies to boost their defense spending commitments. For example, we've even seen it as part of some of the trade deals that have come out of this administration.
Well, I think that it has been very, very solid that Europe has been asked to do more, and they are now agreeing to do more in their own defense. The 3.5% is in their own defense, and the 1.5% beyond that is also part of an interoperable defense that would protect Europe in their lanes of operation. So I think it was a significant Trump success that he got them to do the 5% and work together, but in the NATO context that would be interoperable. That has strengthened NATO, and it's a very good situation. Now, I think we're not talking about NATO itself being a security guarantor, but we're talking about the coalition of the willing of Europeans that have very strong military presence and have agreed to do a military ceasefire line, basically, a security line, and with the help of the United States. They will not do it if we aren't with them on it. And I hope very much that we can do that. Not troops on the ground. We don't need to do that, but we do have certain assets that will be helpful to the Europeans and making sure that Russia keeps his commitment, which so far he certainly hasn't done. And the continuing bombing and killing of people and infrastructure in Ukraine while we are discussing and negotiating a ceasefire is just unacceptable, and Putin needs to pay a price to know that he can't get by with that.
I want to ask you one other question when it comes to this conflict, because we did have some pretty incredible reporting yesterday from Bloomberg News that President Trump held a phone call with Viktor Orban to ask the Hungarian prime minister about why he is against Ukraine joining the European Union. Do you see a viable path here when it comes to EU membership? Is that something that's really on the table and could help solve as we see these negotiations continue?
Yes, certainly EU membership would give the chance for a recovering economy, and whether the EU has the capability to act without unanimity would be an important question to ask. In NATO, you can't do anything without unanimity, but with EU, you have to. I think it would be great if they would allow Ukraine into the EU for trade and commerce, but I don't know if you can do it without unanimity. That's a rule that I just don't know of the EU.